Right now, a whole lot of people are caught literally between countries many believe they cannot go back to, in a country that says it doesn't want them. They're on a bridge. This is new video on the border between Guatemala and Mexico, trying to make their way into Mexico, or for some, the United States. And President Trump has made keeping them out a mission of his. He's also made them, rhetorically at least, into a threat to this country, and he believes a powerful campaign issue. Now, whatever you think of this so-called caravan, whether you see them as refugees or invaders, one thing is clear tonight. They're in a standoff right now with an army of Mexican federales, and tensions are running high. More now from our Bill Weir, who's at the border.
At high noon, the bridge over the border was empty. But then, for some reason, Guatemalan police threw open the gates.
No, cerrado, it's closed. It's closed.
The first tried to form an orderly line, but that lasted only seconds as thousands surged behind them with a mixture of exuberance and frustration and determination. After a fraught half an hour, the crowd calmed itself, even turning on the few troublemakers. Some couldn't take the heat, though, and jumped into the river.
Our message is, we're not criminals. We're coming over here because we want to work. We need a job. We need better, a better life. That's why we're here.
Do you understand that President Trump is going to use the pictures of thousands of people surging to the gates against you? He's going to point that to people and say, this is scary.
It's his politics, we respect, he's the president of the United States, and with all due respect, we are not criminals.
Donald Trump is un anticristo.
Donald Trump is an antichrist, this man says. If he doesn't repent, he's going to hell. We are not criminals, we are workers and fighters. Eventually, Mexico opens to the caravan, but only a trickle are let through, women and children first, including Marta Torres, who tells me her husband was murdered by Honduran drug gangs, and her 3 other kids are still across the river. Do you want to go to the United States? Have you heard, though, that President Trump doesn't want more people coming, and he's even separated families who try to come? What should we do now, then? She says. I don't want my kids in the middle of crime. I don't want to have the lives of my children further destroyed.
Bill Weir joins us now from the Mexican side of the border. So what's going to happen to these people? What's the situation right now?
Well, that's a good question, Anderson. They did, as I said, opened up a trickle there, and they were moving them 3 busloads at a time to a refugee camp here on the Mexican side there. But at the rate we were seeing it, it will take days to get everybody off of that bridge. As you saw there, like Marta, she's seeking asylum from a dangerous place. Others are trying to find a better life for themselves and their kids. But all of them, I've never seen anything like it. It was like people running from a burning building. And to try to convince them, turn around and go back, it just wasn't happening. We had to crash that piece together, so what you missed there is there was tear gas. They literally forced the gates open at one point, but the federales forced them back. 4 officers, according to Secretary of State Pompeo, were injured in that. But then, in a surreal sense, the crowd completely calmed down, and they realized this is just one step on this journey. They walked across Guatemala from Honduras. They're prepared to walk the length of Mexico to find a better life. So this seems like just one more bump in the road. But the new president of Mexico ran on a policy of being more humane towards Central Americans. They've asked for help from the United Nations. That's a first there to help process determining who deserves to move north and who doesn't. A lot of people say they want to work in Mexico. Not all of them are coming to the United States, but just a little taste of why this is such a relentless political knot for the United States. How to make this stop.
Bill Weir, I appreciate you being there, Bill. Thanks very much. Be careful. Two views now on the domestic politics of this. Joining us is Van Jones, host of the Van Jones Show here on CNN. He's a former special advisor to President Obama. Also, Paul Babu, he's the former sheriff of Pinal County, Arizona, and former Republican candidate for Congress. Thanks for both of you being with us. Van, President Trump is saying that this caravan of migrants is somehow being organized by Democrats to impact or tilt the midterms.
I don't think that makes a lot of sense. First of all, Democrats are having a hard enough time just organizing inside the United States to do an election. This probably, if anything, hurts because it raises this whole question, this whole specter of, do we need a wall and are immigrants bad? I do want to say that these images are an ink blot test. Some people, like myself, look at those images and they see people, first of all, who are scared, who are desperate, and who need some help and assistance, whether they get it inside the U.S. borders or outside the U.S. borders. My heart breaks to imagine being stuck on a bridge for hours with my kid. Other people look at that and say, we're scared of those people, we don't want them here. And it just is, we're trying to sort out, I think, as a country, are we welcoming, are we empathetic, do we care about people, or are we mainly going to say we're closed for business as America and we're scared of folks? And I don't know how this is going to play out for the midterms.
Paul, I mean, do you believe, as the president apparently does, that the Democrats have somehow engineered this caravan of thousands, that it somehow plays well for Democrats?
No, clearly I think this is real, that there's serious issues with gang violence and drug lords, cartels, and all kinds of issues down in Central America. I just want to keep this in perspective. There's 45 million people in Central America. And so what is the limit? And Van, you bring up a good point. Is America open or closed? Clearly, America is open. When you look at globally, that America, we take 1 million legal immigrants each and every year. And so what's the capacity? What's the limit? Is it these 4,000 migrants who are trying to rush the Guatemala border into Mexico to come to the United States? Clearly, our refugee asylum laws are being exploited, because never have we had this amount of individuals that are claiming asylum, and we have lawyers from different groups in the U.S. being sent down to Mexico and other places throughout this past year to coach these individuals of exactly what to say to exploit our laws. So the point I make is this is real. How do we help these individuals? I submit that we help them there in their country so they can stay there. We already have a third of all Salvadorans here in the United States of their total population. So what do we just empty their whole countries?
Well, I don't think anybody's saying that. And I actually know some of those El Salvadorans. I'm glad they're here. They're doing some of the best work and raising great families and doing well in our country. That said, I got a little bit confused by what you're saying, because on the one hand you said it's real, on the other hand you this whole myth of lawyers going down there and coaching people, and that's really what's happening. I see it somewhat differently. We are not doing enough on either side of the border when it comes to the amount of violence, of fear, of crime, of hunger, and as a result, when you don't deal well with your neighbors, sometimes your neighbor's problems spill over. I would love to see what you said happen. If we had a real commitment to help the countries down there do better and to figure out what's going on and really were engaging, I think you're right. I think you would have less of these problems. Here's reality. I don't think the people who are supporting Donald Trump want us to help them at all. I don't think they think those folks are worthy of help there or here. I think they see them as some kind of an other. And that's my fear. I'm not saying that it's correct, but my fear is that they're being portrayed as some kind of a scary other that deserve no help, and that scares me in America.
Well, here's what I would say in response, respectfully back. Where's the limit to our generosity? We're the most generous. What about our own people? What about putting Americans first? You look at just Chicago, many cities across America, in one weekend, 80 people that are shot, a dozen plus that are killed in black neighborhoods. Where do they seek asylum? Yeah. What are we doing to prioritize the needs of the homeless, the veterans, our senior citizens? And we're talking about literally borrowing, because we're in such debt, borrowing hundreds of millions of dollars while we already have 22 million illegals that are here in the United States. And there's got to be a limit to our generosity.
I think that I agree with you that we can't do everything for everybody, and that there has to be certain limits, that kind of thing. Here's what I would take exception to. The idea that we should throw up a Chicago, or throw up homeless people, or throw up veterans. Often when I hear people doing that, they don't actually then turn around and go to Chicago. They don't turn around and then go to those funerals in Chicago, help those. it becomes almost like a talking point or something where you're pointing to other people's pain and other people's funerals, but not being involved in helping. So ultimately, it becomes more of a talking point to otherize, for lack of a better term, another bunch of people.
That's not me. I'm talking about real problems in the United States
well, listen,
throughout
I don't
our
see
country.
But
I'm submitting that we put Americans and our citizens in our country and our concerns first above Hondurans.
I may have let me just give me 1 second here. That sounds great. But what I hear is whenever something happens with the immigrant community, we say, hey, we're not going to help you. We should help the people in Chicago. But then we don't help the people in Chicago either. And so it begins to seem like maybe this is just a talking point for the conservatives and not something we're actually going to be actionable about. I think we can do better in Chicago, better at the border, and better beyond the border. But right now, we're not doing better with any of those folks.